Let me start off this video by asking a question. What exactly is it that makes so many people dislike Genshin Impact nowadays? Now, I've given you guys some time to think about this, and some of you have already come up with some of your reasons for why you don't like Genshin Impact. Leave them down in the comments. I'm actually quite curious to see what you guys are thinking about. But what I want you to do right now is to leave that answer in your mind. Have it at the back of your mind or write it down somewhere, and let's look into Wuthering Waves itself. Because I've had this question burning in my mind for a while now. Will Wuthering Waves become like Genshin Impact? Will it reach a stage where people become dissatisfied with Wuthering Waves because it's falling into the same traps, or maybe even a worse trap than Genshin? So that's exactly what I want to talk about in this video, and let's get into it. Now, there are two things I want to talk about, but I might add more as I continue on with the video. The first is Endgame. Now, Endgame is technically a very dicey topic, especially nowadays, but in the beginning days of Genshin, this never really was a problem. Now, I want to be specific about something. When I talk about endgame, in this case, I'm talking about combat endgame, not other types of endgame, specifically combat endgame. When Genshin launched, it launched with a combat endgame mode, the Spiral Abyss. And it was something that a lot of people, especially people who are interested in fighting a lot, were going to aspire to clear as many times as possible. And people definitely did have fun at the beginning of the game, clearing the Spiral Abyss, trying out different team compositions with different characters. And this was also at a stage when a lot of people didn't actually know how to play Genshin Impact. Like, those were the days of Machine Gun Fischl and the rest of these other wacky builds, and not a lot of focus was put on elemental reactions. Because at first, elemental reactions by themselves were not exactly something you were used to, at least the way they worked in Genshin. They don't immediately come to you, and for that reason, a lot of people were more focused on physical builds than they were on focusing on dealing elemental damage. So what exactly then caused the amount of dissatisfaction and downright hatred that we have now for Genshin Impact and its endgame mode? It's the fact that Genshin never improved upon the combat endgame mode that it had. Now, there are a lot of people who will argue that the Spiral Abyss is bad because they think it's only a DPS check or just enemies that are HP sponges or whatever. But one thing that I don't think a lot of people will disagree with is that the main problem with Genshin and Endgame is that they never tried to improve upon the Spiral Abyss or even add any extra modes. Now, the annoying thing about it is they had the ability to do this, and we had gotten limited time events that actually could serve as permanent endgame modes. One of those events was one of the events where you would choose a roster of characters and enemies would keep on cycling, and at random your characters would just keep changing. It was a very cool concept, and it could have worked as an endgame mode. At least I know I would have loved to see it as an endgame mode. But we never got the chance to see it. And one thing that then added to a lot of the fire was when the interview came out and the devs said that they didn't want to do anything else similar to Musk Reef. Now, a lot of people took this as Genshin saying that they weren't going to add any more combat endgame related content to the game. And a lot of people still think that to this day. I personally am one of those people who doesn't believe that. I believe that they plan on adding something later on. But therein lies the problem. Why have they waited so long? This game has gone through 4 major versions that have like 7 to 9 patches inside of them, and despite all this, we don't have a permanent endgame mode that is combat related. They even added TCG, which I don't believe anybody plays. Like, why on earth would you play TCG? Are you normal? Really, the problem with combat endgame is the fact that they didn't improve on what they already had. So with that said, let's look at Wuthering Waves. Wuthering Waves is launching with 3 different combat endgame modes. One endgame mode that is very similar to the Spiral Abyss. We have the Tower of Adversity, and we have the depth of Illusive RAM. Well, at least these were what were in CBT2. We don't know if anything is going to change in global. I don't expect any changes, but you never know what could happen. So the question is then, will Wuthering Waves actually try to improve upon the combat endgame modes that they have at the moment? If Wuthering Waves decides that they're not going to, and they decide to become complacent, and they don't add anything, they don't try to improve upon the modes, they don't try to do anything else to keep the hardcore players, the people that want to grind, that want to mold, entertained, then it's definitely going to go down the same path as Genshin, because a lot of people will simply just see Genshin in it. And in that case, a lot of people will just continue playing the game just because they like the game and not really because they enjoy the game. So how exactly can the devs avoid this? Well, it's already a good thing that the devs are listening to feedback from fans. So we as fans can come out and say, if they introduce a limited time endgame mode, that we want this endgame mode to come in as a permanent event. They'll most probably hear us. They may not add it in immediately, but they'll definitely be considering it, and hopefully sometime in future they add it in. And this is a way that will ensure that they don't fall into the Genshin pitfall. But that will lead me very smoothly into the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is the fact that they listen to the fans. So Kuro Games is known for listening to the fans. That's one of the things that Wuthering Waves was built up on. And Genshin Impact was never really like that. Like, it would take a lot of heat to make MiHoYo change whatever it is that they have already implemented in the game. For example, the weapon banner, it took a massive outrage from CN in order to get that changed. The Zhongli buff was because of a massive outrage. I'm sure you get my point. So the thing here is, if Kuro Games suddenly decides to stop listening to the fans and they start to do their own thing, and that it requires a lot of effort in order to get Kuro Games to change something, a lot of dissatisfaction is going to start to build up, and over time people are going to start disliking Wuthering Waves because it doesn't feel like they're being heard. A lot of people, even in real life, when they don't feel like they're being heard, will most probably start to get dissatisfied with whatever working condition or whatever situation that they're in, because it just starts to feel like you're using the person and not actually caring about what the person wants. So another thing that could cause Kuro Games to become like Genshin Impact is not listening to the fans eventually. Now here's the thing, I've said this before in one of my older videos, but I think it's going to reach a stage where that will become the case. Because as Wuthering Waves continues to grow in popularity, it's going to get a lot more fans, and with a lot more fans comes a lot of people giving different forms of feedback. And by now you've probably noticed that a lot of people don't say the exact same thing. Like, there are some times when people will agree a lot, and there are times when people will have varying opinions on a single matter. And then it becomes a little tricky to know what exactly people want. Like, what exactly is it that the fans want in this case against another case? And that's one of the reasons that I think that eventually it's going to reach a stage where Kuro Games might stop listening. Well, not listening completely, but not listening to an extent. It's just a personal thing. And one thing I hope is that by the time we get to that stage, Wuthering Waves is already in a state where people can say that they are very comfortable with what they have in the game already. So I think I'll end off the video there. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about, but I don't think I have enough time to put that in here. So I'll end off the video here. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe for Wuthering Waves guides, lore videos, challenge videos, and some other stuff, including videos on Project Mugen and Azure Promilia whenever we start to get news on those games. Join the hideout on Discord and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for real-time updates on whatever games that I like to cover. And with all that said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace, guys.